Hi, Peter Allen's Finger Transformations, and what I want to discuss today is kind of sitting postures and how they're starting to affect our everyday life. I, for years, would kind of sit with a cross-leg stance, and I could always do it with my right. I had a hard time doing it with my left, where it felt more uncomfortable, so I would always do it with one side more than the other. And I realized the folly of this years ago, but I couldn't loosen my tissue enough to fix it. You know, when I'm sitting in this position, I got to start to realize is my glutes are getting really short and contracted. Now, I always sat kind of in this kind of cross-leg stance, and I thought it was good because, again, I'm thinking I'm flexible because a lot of people have a hard time getting into this position, but not realizing at the same time that I was really keeping my glutes really contracted and tight over the years. And again, when we kind of sit or move in one position for a long time, the muscles are just kind of holding there, and we're not realizing what's happening when we're holding these positions for too long. And I kind of all too now aware that my glutes became really short and contracted over time. Now, kind of women and some men otherwise will kind of cross over. I'm still too tight because my adductors aren't allowing me to get there. So, you know, my adductors are just kind of popping out right now when I try to cross my leg over. Now, you know, this is looked at as a glute stretch. Right? But I got to also understand, as I stretch my glute, I'm also shortening my adductors. And a lot of us really aren't having any pain or discomfort in the adductors, so they've been really, in my opinion, kind of overlooked for years. But this is how our kind of thighs start rubbing together. Maybe as you age or something, we start noticing kind of looks like, you know, more tissue kind of hanging there. But it's because our hips are misaligned, and our adductors are just becoming so tight that the tissue just kind of starts to hang there in certain spots. But our adductors attach, you know, all the way through here. Kind of like this. I think of a weird spider web or a partial port of a spider web. You know, so they're coming all the way up to here. And then if you add in like a tilt in the hips where I'm kind of sitting like this or pulled over, now I'm shortening everything. My adductors become extremely shortened because of this kind of tilt that all of us end up doing. Now, I used to do this, but then I would hyperarch my back, but my pelvis is still tilted. And so we're developing a lot of scar tissue kind of in these key areas around our hips that are affecting our everyday life and our movement pattern. And like videos that I've showed before, this is where you want to start to kind of break up your scar tissue on your kind of glutes, hips, kind of pelvic core area. As we start to release one area, you'll start to get better movement in the other. And then the thing that I'm kind of noticing, you know, like I was explaining with my adductors, is I got to start to get this tissue moving again. Like this tissue is just kind of like rock hard now because I've been able to move my hip back out. The adductors have been shortened for years, so now I got to start promoting healthy movement patterns with these adductors so that I can hope to regain kind of fully my range of motion, my movements. Like I've never been this flexible. I still get some tightness in the back. I can feel that hamstring kind of pulling. That's also my adductors that kind of swoop in here. And so I got to start thinking of ways to measure our flexibility. We all kind of tend to use certain ones, whether it's kind of sitting with our legs. You know, still I'm not even the best here. I notice my right hip tighter than my left, and that's kind of restricting my movement to get into this position. The other thing that's going to restrict me too is my low back, my hip area up here. Okay? It's not just the hamstrings, and that's kind of what we got to start to realize when we're doing a stretch like this. That's, you know, supposedly just for the hamstrings. Well, if the hips aren't in the right position, it's going to tighten the hamstrings even more. Now, because we feel the hamstrings the most, we're assuming that's what we got to release, not realizing, well, if my hips are out of place or out of alignment, that they're going to affect my hamstrings, my quadriceps, and kind of everything out there. So the more we start to realize we can kind of do something about kind of our sitting, or again, just kind of stretching, and for that fact, you know, for years I tried to just kind of turn my legs back in, and I think that's how my adductors started getting really tight, because I was going from one extreme to the other. And at the same time, not using any kind of tool or anything to loosen the tissue to help facilitate that. So I was just going from tight this way, tight that way, and then kind of keep switching it. And that's what we're doing when we're exercising. Now what I've started trying to do, and this, I'll have to kind of explore this a little bit more for men and women. Men might want to kind of try and internally rotate a little bit better. I know women tend to do that more, and that's kind of, I think, how they kind of end up with a little bit more scar tissue and tightness on the outside of the hips, because women are tending to do this, and men are tending to do this. And they both have different repercussions over time. Same thing with the core. Men tend to push out, women tend to pull in. And all too often what's happening is they're just kind of getting stuck in that position and become inflexible, or lack flexibility, I guess would be the best way to explain it. And the more inflexible we become, the tighter we are, the weaker we start to feel. And once we kind of start to understand that weakness equals, weakness is a result of our tightness. And as we can kind of start to explore exercise and kind of fascial movement together, we can really start to kind of make better improvements on our kind of personal training, our exercise regimens and things like that, so that we can kind of find a happy medium for both. And that's what I'm exploring the most is now is how do we exercise to promote really healthy movement patterns, and what to do if we start to get stuck, because I feel like everybody kind of reaches a plateau, myself included, and sometimes that plateau might end up in an injury, and now we got to kind of rehab it back. And we don't really realize that the scar tissue that we develop from that changes everything. I never did. I kept thinking, I'd pull my back out or something would happen and it would just stop hurting and I'm fine. And, now I realize I just kind of developed a ton of scar tissue leading right off that SI joint, most likely from the way that I sat for years. And now I can start to facilitate that movement. So if I want to be able to kind of sit better, I'm going to start to loosen this tissue up so I can get better movement. And then I want to come up with, or even just exercising in general, and realizing again that cycling is probably one of the best things that we can do because it's facilitating bigger movements. I used to not like it because of putting the back in a compromised position, but if you think of running, you're really just in an upright position and we're really limited unless we're like sprinting all out. And I don't know too many people that I see running that are all out sprinting. And again, if we're not stretching, we're not spending enough time stretching at all. We're again using a percussion gun to help speed that along. I mean, the hypervolt has been tremendous in my work and kind of dictating all these findings. So just try and be more aware of kind of how you're sitting, what you can start to do. Watch some of the other videos about how to loosen the hips, legs, quadriceps, back, and we can start to understand that our little everyday movement patterns are really what's kind of defining us. And the more we can kind of be aware of our own body and our own body position, the better you can facilitate exercises to promote better movement pattern and kind of carry that over to your everyday life. That's kind of what you're looking for when you're trying to exercise, is how do I exercise and how does it carry over to my everyday life? All too often we're just kind of going to the gym to exercise for exercise sake, but a lot of times we're taking our bad posture with us and we're not exercising to promote better posture and better movement pattern. Hopefully you found this helpful, and look for the videos in terms of kind of loosening up your hips and the tissue there, and that will help and get you more aware of kind of how sitting and standing and all these other things, maybe like kind of hip popping, develop scar tissue, and what we can start to do to kind of start changing that. Okay, thank you. Hope you found this helpful.